Franklin has requested me on Patreon to review the Amazing Digital Circus The Last Act, the finale movie of the popular indie animated series. Well, at least that's how it played theatrically. I should mention I've watched the show and I like it a lot. I find it extremely creative with a great concept and clearly defined characters with a lot of personality. It really appealed to my sensibilities and I was immediately drawn into the world Gooseworx and the team at Glitch Productions put together. For the purposes of this review, I'm going to specifically talk about the last act, so I will be going into spoilers. The last act consists of the 8th and 9th episodes, and I do think watching them together is the best way to experience them. The end of the 8th episode even leads right into the 9th one, enough that I'm surprised they were released separately. I felt the story conceived for the conclusion was one that really developed and provided satisfying ends to the character arcs. Although what's interesting is the characters the last act primarily focuses attention on are the antagonistic ones, Kane and Jax. These are the ones who have most tormented the characters stuck in the Amazing Digital Circus, and the conclusion tapped into how they cope with everything they've dealt with. Kane has primarily been an AI trying to come up with adventures for them to partake in, and we see how this frustrates him and messes with what he's been coded to do. While he constantly tortures them with these adventures, at the end of the day he still wants them to have a good experience they'll remember. Kane goes through a lot during the last act, and it's interesting to see him get to a point where he finally understands the people he's been tormenting, and that he does it independently and finally developing empathy himself is impressive. Then there's Jax, who frequently acts like a jerk towards the others. There's a key moment in the last act where we finally see what he was like before Pomni arrived. Gooseworx does not seem to hold our hand or try to force us to feel a certain way about him. Jax is shown acting horribly to his friend Ribbit, and we see how this affects her. It shows how his jerkish behavior developed out of Jax feeling he'd revealed too much about himself to Ribbit. My personal interpretation is he went for this overly cartoony persona to hide his actual feelings. I also felt the last act did a good job of diving into why the people in the circus abstract. It seems to almost come from feeling they have nothing else to offer anymore. It's why Pomni tries so hard to explain to Jax that he could still play an important role in the digital circus and provide that support if he wants to. If you were to ask me who my favorite Amazing Digital Circus character is, it's Pomni. I like how she's often trying to help the others stuck there and figure out exactly what's going on. Her real-world counterpart's love of exploring also proves helpful as she tries to solve things. Lizzie Freeman's voice work helped bring further personality to Pomni and just made her an overall endearing character while still digging into some of her flaws. I'm also a big fan of her design, which has the look of 1930s cartoon characters right down to the reaction shots. The animation and designs of the Amazing Digital Circus just have a really appealing look. The main influence came from 1990s computer animation, and there is something I find immensely charming about that era, as studios like Pixar, PDI, and Blue Sky were experimenting with what the technology was capable of. As I brought up on social media, the setting reminded me quite a bit of the building from Disney's One Saturday Morning block, with the use of colors and shapes of the different sections of the circus. Meanwhile, the characters are made really expressive and bouncy, which add to their charm. I especially like the higher frame rate, which perfectly suits them. I also thought of the sorts of computer games I used to really like in the 90s, with the way the shots are framed and the different adventures that Kane introduces and the characters have to solve. Then there are moments where Pomni explores the circus's version of the office that created the program. Those scenes play into the fascination a lot of people of a certain age have with these spaces and the creepiness that sets in when they're abandoned. It's the same reason Backrooms was so successful. The music similarly captures the feel of those computer games, from the main theme to the several other pieces we hear throughout. A big centerpiece of the last act involves an excellent and fast-paced musical number performed by Kane. This is during a point where he becomes frustrated at the characters complaining, and it's a song that really digs into his frame of mind, while also being highly entertaining and a fun homage to 1930s musicals. One of the big revelations of the last act is that the characters stuck in the Amazing Digital Circus are just digital copies, and their human counterparts are still out there living their lives. I thought that was such an inspired idea and allowed the human characters to continue to live while giving these avatars some sense of closure and even happiness as they find out they're actually doing okay. They reserve themselves to living in the circus, but as shown in the final scenes and during the end credits, they make do by partaking in their interests. Maybe this is not entirely ideal, but they've found a way to still pursue what makes them happy and will continue to try to put their best foot forward. I think that's how a lot of us view the world. Obviously it's necessary to watch the series first before the last act, as that does heighten the emotional investment of these characters. Gooseworx has made it clear there will not be a second season of the Amazing Digital Circus, as this was the story she wanted to tell, and I respect that. She did a marvelous job with both the series and this finale movie, which I felt concluded the character arcs in a satisfying way. Now, if you've seen the Amazing Digital Circus, The Last Act, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for the request, Franklin.